Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to talk about what probably is the most important concept in all of AP microeconomics, and that's the profit maximization rule. So let's get started in talking about this chart. So remember in the last video we were talking about perfect competition, and so that definitely connects to what we're doing here. So we have a chart that shows incomplete information about one perfectly competitive firm in some perfectly competitive market. And the question is, well, how do we know it's a perfectly competitive firm? Well, the answer is the price column, okay? Because if you notice, it's the same per unit price no matter how much output I'm producing. And that may seem weird to you, like, why is it always $10? Well, if you are a perfectly competitive firm and you take the price from the price in the market's $10, period. It doesn't matter if you're selling 1 unit or 50 billion units, you're still getting $10 per unit of output. And so that's how we know it's a perfectly competitive firm, because the product price is the same no matter how much Q happens to be. The next column over is the demand column. And again, I encourage you, if you want to pause the video, draw this chart, maybe screenshot it, open it up in an app you can edit, and then fill it out as we go. But the next one over is demand, or D. And remember, when we think about demand, we're thinking about what are consumers willing to pay. Well, if you're a consumer in this market, you only have one option in terms of the price you're willing to pay, and that's $10, because that's the only price that firms are going to offer the product for, because remember, they take their price from the market. And so it's going to be $10, and I'm going to cheat here and just say all the way down, okay? So no matter if I'm selling it for 1 unit or 10 units, consumers are going to be willing to pay $10, because that's the only price that's going to be charged. And one of my in-person students today, and I'm going to give Logan a shout out here, first student shout out of the year, pointed out that that would make the demand curve perfectly elastic, and that's 100% correct. Now, moving over to the next column, we have total revenue, and we've already encountered total revenue in a previous video in this unit, and that's price times quantity. And so let's go ahead and fill that one in, and I'm going to change colors here. So that's 10 times 1 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, and then we just keep going down, 30, 40. I'm putting the dollar sign each time because I just want you guys to get in the habit of knowing that these are dollar amounts, because you don't want to lose points on an AP question because you forget the units. So yeah, 10, 20, 30, all the way down to 100. The next column over is a new one for us, MR, and MR is marginal revenue. Marginal revenue is the additional revenue I get by selling an additional unit of output. In other words, it is the change in total revenue. So if I produce, for example, 1 unit instead of 0 units, how much do I gain in total revenue? And the answer here is $10. Well, what about if I go from if I go from selling 1 unit to 2 units? Well, I go from $10 to $20. So again, I gain $10. And if we kept doing that, you would notice it's $10 all the way down. So if you notice, price, demand, and marginal revenue in a perfectly competitive firm are all the same value at every single level of output. And that's just the way perfectly competitive firms work. That's the way the math works. The next column over is about as relevant as the New York Jets this season for you football fans. It's called average revenue. It's something you will occasionally see referenced in a perfectly competitive graph for the firm, which we're going to get into in the next video. But I'm going to go ahead and explain to you how to calculate it, and it's simply taking total revenue divided by your output level. So for instance, for the first row, it would be 10 divided by 1, which is $10. Next one's 20 divided by 2, which is $10. And again, it's going to be 10 all the way down. So price, demand, marginal revenue, average revenue in a perfectly competitive firm are all the same number. Now, when we get to other market structures, that may not be the case, and we'll see when we get to units 7 and 8. Next column over is total cost, which has already been given to us. And then the last column is one that should be familiar from Unit 5, and that's marginal cost. Remember, marginal cost is the change in total cost. So this first blank in this column may seem a little weird to you because the answer that I want is $30. Now, for me to say it's $30, that would mean when quantity is 0, total cost would have to be 0 for the change from 0 to 1 units to be $30. Well, we know that when output's 0, you should still have fixed costs. You should still have to pay your rent. So we're kind of assuming here that fixed costs are 0, which isn't very realistic, but just go with it for now. All right, so we're going to change total cost from 30 to 50, so that's 20. 50 to 65 is 15. Then we got 10. And then we're going up by 5s again because I set it up that way, so it'll be easy for Mr. Schmidt to remember how to calculate it because he's trying to do this live and he doesn't want to screw up. So hopefully those are all the correct numbers, and it looks like they are. So 30, 20, 15, 10, and then up 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So now that we've got all this data, here's the question. What quantity should this firm produce if its goal is to maximize profit? Now, you can pause the video and think about it for a second and then come back and see if you're right. But what you're going to quickly notice here is it does not matter what level of output they're producing. They're taking a loss at every single level of output. And so you may conclude here, hey, why would you produce any level of output? Why wouldn't you just produce nothing and take your ball and go home because you're taking a loss? Well, the answer here is that even if you don't produce any output, you still will have fixed costs. Okay, we're assuming, again here with the math, didn't have any fixed costs, but we're assuming in the real world you would have fixed costs. And so you might still want to produce in order to cover some of those fixed costs and reduce your losses. In other words, firms should not just think about maximizing profit, but also how do I minimize my losses if I have to take losses? And so the correct level of output that this firm should produce is 4 units. Now, why is that? Well, there's 2 ways to think about this. The first would be that the loss at 4 units is the smallest it can possibly be. Okay, the smallest it can possibly be. The other way to think about this is that at a quantity of 4, marginal revenue, $10, is equal to marginal cost, $10. And therefore, that would be the loss minimizing combination, because think about it this way. If I produce a unit of output and it earns me more revenue than it costs me to make, I should make that unit, right? If it makes me $6 and only costs me $4, make the unit. But if it costs me, let's say, $20 to make the unit, but I only get $5 in revenue, why would I make that unit? And that leads to the most important concept in micro, and it's called the profit maximization or loss minimization rule. And that rule says that a firm will maximize profit or minimize loss when it produces the greatest quantity such that marginal revenue equals marginal cost or marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost. Because you may be given a table where marginal revenue and marginal cost are never the same number. In that case, you should pick the quantity, the greatest quantity, where marginal revenue is still greater than marginal cost. This is a rule that you must know inside and out. It is incredibly important for microeconomics. Again, To maximize profit or minimize loss, you produce, and this doesn't matter if it's perfect competition, monopoly, doesn't matter. All firms who care about profit follow this rule. Produce the greatest quantity such that marginal revenue is equal to or greater than marginal cost. So that's all for this video on the profit maximizing or loss minimizing rule. Until next time, have a great day.